Hello, everyone, and welcome to the InBizLV Podcast, the podcast for business people, entrepreneurs, and anyone who cares about business. I'm Mark Fierro. If you've lived in Las Vegas for a while, let's say decades, you may remember when outside the casinos, there weren't really that many great restaurants. A few Italian, a couple of German, one or two French destinations. But the one name left standing from that era is the Golden Steer Steakhouse. Stepping into the Golden Steer is like walking back into old Las Vegas. It seems nothing in the place has changed. Well, this year, in the age of COVID-19, everything has changed. And the young couple who are at the helm are driving a new approach that has taken the Golden Steer brand national. Joining us today, Golden Steer's managing partners, Nick McMillan, and a little bit later in the show, we may have Amanda Signorelli. Thanks so much for joining us today, Nick.
Thanks for having us, Mark. We really appreciate it.
You know, I got to tell you, I'm going to be telling this story, the entrepreneurial side of this story for the rest of my life, because the worst thing that could ever happen in the history of Las Vegas, unless, we just got leveled by a great big flood, is COVID. We're the one place that got hit hardest than any place. And you guys used that synapse, that gap, instead of running for the hills, you took a very different turn. Give us the big picture, because I want to hear it from you right from the top.
Yeah, so it's been a crazy year. Certainly when we started it, we didn't plan for a global pandemic, but it's been one of the exciting things with the Golden Steer is just its icon status, right? It's authentic. It is a steakhouse unlike any other in the country. We've been around for 60 plus years here in Las Vegas. And it was one of the exciting things to my wife and myself, and we'll actually bring my wife in, Amanda.
Amanda, hello. Hello.
Was the brand. And I think we had a vision for ways that we could take the brand outside the four walls of the restaurant. And it was something that we had wanted to pursue. And COVID actually gave us an opportunity to accelerate those plans. And so it's been exciting from that perspective. Certainly Vegas, like you said, aside from a giant flood, a pandemic where people stopped traveling has really hit the city hard. And it's been challenging to navigate, but we are very, very fortunate with the support, or for the support of locals that have continued to come out and support the restaurant industry as we try to navigate this crazy time.
So one thing that's happened in a couple of places across the country, there are great steakhouses who've leveraged their names and they're selling product online through the internet, and you open this box and you get a great steak and you cook the steak and you're having a great bite. You took it to a whole different level. Tell us about what happens. Here's the box, you open it. Tell us what happens.
Yeah, I think to your point, there were a lot of steakhouses that said, let's create a product and just put it online and figure it out. And we said, the last thing we want is for somebody to get a box and say, I just got steaks, and that's it. That's not particularly exciting. It doesn't make people like, yes, I'm so excited to order again. Why are you excited about this box? We said, how do we reconceptualize this, and what's the actual problem we're trying to solve? And so we started at the very root of it, which was, the issue is, in the world of 2020, you have two options when it comes to dining when you're at home. You're either going to cook for yourself because you need to eat and you need the nutrition, or you're going to go full on Betty Crocker mode and spend your entire day cooking, which is probably really fun those first 3 months and not so exciting for month 4 or 5. So what's the in-between that gives everybody the entire experience? And used to be restaurants with that hospitality that made you so excited in all of these pieces. So we said, all right, well, what is hospitality? Let's redefine this into like core elements. And we say hospitality is service, ambiance, and food. Okay, so let's put all three of those in a box. Food, we know, want to include where we've got the top 6% of steaks in America, which is huge, but we want to have other pieces that go with that, which is thinking ahead. What are the needs? So when you cook steak, what do you want? You don't want just the steak. You're going to want the seasoning. You're going to want the compound butter. So we have our maitre d' butter, which is everything we put in there that's handcrafted in the restaurant. The au jus, which is a handcrafted design that we have as well. So let's have all the things you would want. We've also got a box now that includes our famous twice baked potato, which is twice the size of your head, cream corn and everything. So that's the food piece. Next one was service. All right, when we think about service, That's about anticipating people's needs ahead of time. So like, how do we get them the recipes? How do we walk them through everything? We're actually working on building out an Alexa skill so that you can say, open how to cook the best steaks. And the next thing you know, we've got somebody to walk you through, which is really neat. Then we go to the next one, which is ambiance. So ambiance is a really powerful thing where ambiance can be both in terms of the packaging that you touch and the experience of opening. So you get this beautiful black box that you open up, and then immediately the first thing you see is our guide to how you set the ambiance, which includes a Spotify playlist. You can scan the QR code. You'll have all the sounds of the steer and Frank Sinatra, Fly Me to the Moon and everything in the background, which is amazing. And then it tells you, let's light the candles. Let's go ahead and get everything set on the table. Now we're including embroidered napkins. So we put all of that together so that it's really thoughtful. And it's not just one thing, it's the entire trifecta of what is hospitality as a conception in something that you get to have at your home shipped to the door.
So now we fast forward, and now that the holidays are here, you take it to the other level, the next level, and that's tell us about that.
Yeah, so with the holidays in town, the big thing for us was, how do we make meals memorable in such an odd time, right? You're no longer going to do the traditions that you used to have. You're no longer going to do the same thing you always expected. What do you do to make something unique, but also, frankly, to make something easy? This is already a stressful time. How do we make that easy on a consumer so they don't have to worry about all of these little pieces that go into it and have to spend all day? I mean, everybody's in a tough spot. So we said, all right, let's turn around and develop a package exclusively for the holidays, which is what we call the steer setup. That box includes embroidered napkins, dining tablecloth, a tomahawk, which is a fantastic cut of meat. This thing is amazing. It's already been wet aged for more than 30 days and then dry aged again for 60 days, and it's prime. You literally can't get better creme de la creme on meat. Then we've combined it with the twice baked potato, the creamed corn, so you have everything together for a full meal that ends up being a really special dining occasion for your holidays.
Yeah, I think to that end, the inclusion of the napkins and the tablecloth was a way for us to continue to bring the steer experience home, so that, in a year when a lot of folks haven't been able to eat out, we said, all right, well, we can include the ambiance, we can include these other things. What other things can we include to really dial it in so that you can experience the Golden Steer at home? And so we came up with the tablecloth. It's the same tablecloth we use in the restaurant, same napkins, and then we embroidered our logo on there for just that extra touch, so you can feel like you're in the Golden Steer.
That's great. Now, the other hit that there wasn't enough hits. The other hit that Las Vegas took is no conventions. And so you come up with, if the conventions aren't coming to Las Vegas, you're going to take a piece of Las Vegas to the conventions. And tell us about these business meetings that you're doing via Zoom.
Yeah, it's super exciting, right? So with the loss of the conventions and the loss of these private dining and all these corporations coming into town, we heard that they were looking for ways to still interact with their clients, or as a way to reward, a sales effort or a big product effort. And so we created this new, which is a virtual private dinner. So we overnight a box of ingredients to the participants in the event, and we built a menu that captures the essence of the Golden Steer. So it's our world famous Caesar salad. So we have all the ingredients there. You make your own dressing. We have our signature cut, the 22-ounce ribeye, a couple of our signature sides, and then our classic dessert, our bananas Foster. So we send all of those ingredients in a box, and then a couple days later, everyone hops on a Zoom call, and I walk them through the process for making a classic Golden Steer meal. And so everyone gets to go through, separating an egg and putting the egg yolk in to make the world famous Caesar. And then we show them how to make a perfect steak indoors, and we include some of our house-made seasoning with it. And it's really great because I lead the cooking piece of it, and Amanda's on as well, and she dives into the history of the restaurant and some of the famous and infamous folks that have come in, from the Rat Pack to Tony Spilatro. And it's just a great experience, and it gives companies a way to do something unique and special for clients and for employees this year.
Before you had launched any of this or done any of these Zoom calls, would you ever imagine that there would be this kind of team building? And they're still scattered all over the place. They're not even in the same room, but the act of cooking, all simultaneously, all the same. This is real team building, isn't it?
It is. It really, really is, because it's a unique shared experience that everyone can go through. And everybody what we've noticed is that everyone makes it a little differently. And so then people kind of engage and talk about they left their steak in a little longer or a little shorter, or they didn't put in the anchovies into the Caesar salad dressing because they don't like anchovies. And so it's a way for people to just bond. And it's interesting because it combines, one of the reasons that I love the hospitality industry is that it brings people together. And I also happen to love the tech world. And so it's really been a way to bring those. How do we, in a world where things have kind of shifted, how do we continue to deliver that hospitality experience and bring people together and utilize digital technology? And so we found an interesting way to do that.
So when we say that the Golden Steer has been there forever, let's use just a couple of kind of indicators. Who's the butcher that's been there the longest? Who's the waiter that's been there the longest? And how long have they been there approximately?
So Sergio is back in the kitchen. He's been there the longest, manning the butcher side of things. He's been there over 30 years. Been working probably on the same broiler for those 30 years, which is now well seasoned, and he does a tremendous job. For him, it's a craft. And once in a while I'll go back there and we'll be talking about weights for what he's cutting, if it's the signature bone-in ribeye, and I'll pick a couple, and everyone is spot on. It's always 22 ounces when he's cutting it. He's been doing it for so long. And in the front of the house, a couple of servers that have been there the longest, Vanko and Fabian. I think Fabian's been with us since the early 70s, so has seen just a tremendous amount of Vegas history and Vegas personalities come through the door. And then Vanko, who has been, I think, with us since the late 80s, and has just waited on an amazing, amazing number of people, and has just some legendary stories of the folks that have come through the door.
Vanko is definitely a favorite icon for everyone. I mean, everybody loves him. Anytime we're posting or copying or anything on social media, and customers come in all the time, Vanko is always a favorite because he treats everything like a craft, and he's a really wonderful man.
So if you think about it, I mean, we're just not to be talking general terms to nail it right down. These are the people who prepared food for and waited on Frank Sinatra at the top of his day, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, the old mob guys, Tony Spilatro. They say that Tony Spilatro may have eaten his very last dinner at the Golden Steer. These are people that have been in place. And by the way, I've seen that whole butchering piece, and it is an absolute art form. And there is a human being that is standing there that is cutting it, and he has been doing it from the beginning. It's an amazing thing. I was listening to a podcast today, and Dr. Signorelli was talking through all the days, and I would urge anybody who is any way interested in Las Vegas. For those of you who weren't in Las Vegas, haven't been in Las Vegas for a long time, and they talk about the mob, and you kind of get a general idea. So let's just say you're driving down the strip. You just come into town from Southern California. So you drive in, and on the left-hand side of the strip is the Hacienda, mob-owned. On the right side of the strip is the Tropicana, mob-owned. Then you go a little bit further down the street, and there's the Tower Pizza, a small little Italian restaurant, wonderful, mob-owned. On the right is the Aladdin, mob-owned. On the left, oh, that's not mob-owned. That's owned by the Teamsters Pension Fund, mob-owned. Go over to the Flamingo. That was the first mob-owned. Caesar's not so much, but. And you go down to the Sands, mob-owned. Castaways, go down the road. Desert Inn, mob-owned. Stardust, from the beginning to the end, mob-owned. You get to Circus, influence, and Tony Spilatro had a shop there, oddly enough. And Sahara, not so much. But then, when you turn left onto Sahara and you're going to the Golden Steer, right before you get to the Golden Steer is a cute little jewelry store that is known as a front for stolen diamonds. It came right out of the Hole in the Wall gang, which is right next door to the Golden Steer. So it's like, this was the place. This is where the mob and the biggest names in entertainment on the planet Earth came together in this one restaurant. Every time you walk in there, it's just like, I can't, and you have names on every table, including Ralph Lamb, one of my favorite people in the history of the planet. It is a different feel. I urge anybody that cares a lot about Las Vegas at a minimum, grab a drink at a minimum, and if unless you're crazy, you'll make a reservation. So how do you, I noticed that you don't depend a lot on that story though, because, you know, I was a reporter covering the mob back then, and I never heard that was Tony Spilatro's. Those are his last days. That was where he hid out, and he could talk like this, and the FBI couldn't listen to his conversations. You don't play off of that a lot yet, do you?
You know, it always kind of depends. We always talk about the history of the restaurant is broken down in 3 waves. We kicked off with the Western Frontier wave, where the way that we first became famous was actually all of the fantastic, you know, actors and actresses and the rich people out in California would drive over. They would come to Nevada and they'd go shooting and catching whatever they could get for wild game. And what we became famous for was that they would bring whatever they caught into the restaurant, and our chefs were so good at cooking anything that they could literally take care of it all, and you always knew you'd get the best of whatever you caught. So we started off as the Western Frontier and the place where all the cowboys and the cooking and everything, and anytime I talk to the chefs, I'm like, do you remember what was the hardest? And like, rattlesnake was hard. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, glad we're not that anymore. That's fun. And then the second way of, you know, talking a bit about kind of the famous side, that's, I'd say the little easier thing to commonly talk about, which is what everyone knows us for: Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, all those pieces. And with that does come the seedy element as well, right, of Tony Spilatro and the really strong connection we frankly had when it came to our patrons who were part of these mobster groups coming in. And a big reason that we had such a strong following within the mob for a lot of the folks who were dining there was also because we were neutral ground, right? So exactly like you said, all these casinos were owned by mob families. So if you're saying, all right, we're going to sit down and have a dinner, or we're going to sit down and get together and we're all going to chat, you're not going to do it to endorse one specific family. You're going to do it off the strip, and you're going to do it in a place where we're all respectable, and it's not specifically one place. And so we became what was called the neutral ground, which became a really big piece. So you had Tony coming over because Gold Rush was so close. You also had his lawyers, which back in the day, that was Goodman and Stein law firm, constantly coming in to try and support and help and advise them. And then you had the mobsters doing their meetings. So it was a big part of our history, but it's always been a balance of talking about that, which is such a rich part of the history, but then also respecting that at the end of the day, these are mobsters and these are people who have done some really terrible things. And so it's not always the best to be like, yes, we're absolutely the place to go for all things mob, because you're celebrating something that maybe you shouldn't be. So it's a little bit of a give and take. We're very proud of everybody who's come through, but we also recognize who those people were as well.
You know, I was surprised. I knew that Frank Sinatra was there, and I knew that he was there quite a bit, but you know, that was a magnet for him, because he wanted to do everything he could to get out of the casino as fast as he could, because then he would be, you know, just mobbed by people trying to talk to him, and it was hands off. It was a kind of place, no matter how famous you were, that you could go to the Golden Steer and people would give you your space. But there's a funny story about Sinatra decides he's not going to give anybody a space, and he goes around and starts singing to everybody. And I'm not talking about singing to the room, right? I got to hear the story. Let's hear the story.
Yeah, so apparently, and we were very fortunate in that one of our customers came up to us and they said, do you remember the time? And I was like, oh, this is going to be a great story. We always know when this is good. That Frank came around and was absolutely drunk after one of his shows, having a great old time, saying hi to everybody, and started going around to each table and serenading the guests, and just sitting there and singing and getting in and dancing and being a part of the whole thing, which you just imagine the energy and the beauty of a moment like that and how perfect it would have been. It would have been amazing to see that in action and actually imagine it and see that come together, because it would have been perfect. And it's so interesting to imagine all these little moments, especially, you know, if you think about the broader context, the reason why the Rat Pack really came and became such fans wasn't actually Frank who led the charge, but it was Sammy Davis Jr. And we're so appreciative of that background and story and commitment, and everybody endorsing us and being excited about that.
So, a little context for those of you who haven't been in Las Vegas that long. Las Vegas was the Mississippi of the West, and these were some mean streets. And if you were a black man, a black person, man or woman, and you were on the street after 9 o'clock and you weren't back on your side of town, you were in deep trouble. and you probably would go to the hospital before you'd go to jail. But of all the places on the Strip, one of the places that was the most accepting of Sammy Davis Jr. and also Frank Sinatra was also helping, but without any question, the stories are that Sammy Davis Jr. could always, without regard to what time it was, could go to the Golden Steer and be treated like the king that he was, the star that he was, with all of these people that loved him and followed him to see his act in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And he used to go from where he was performing down to the Moulin Rouge, which is where he used to stay, and he would end up bringing everybody around. So he started off, and we were more than excited to come there and have him have any booth and sit anywhere he wanted in the restaurant. So he would anchor down and have a great time. And because everybody wanted to be with him, Frank and all the rest of them would say, all right, we're following, let's do it. We're going to stay. And that became the official hangout because everyone could be together.
Yeah, I will say that all these guys are pretty cool, but Sammy Davis Jr. was definitely the coolest out of the Rat Pack. He always had the attitude. He knew how to play it. One of the great stories that I heard was when Mario Andretti calls and your dad tells him there's no room. And he says, well, I'm Mario Andretti. And he basically says, yeah, I'm Mickey the Mouse, because anybody could say anything, right? And so tell the story. You'll do it far better than I.
Yeah, so it was back in the early 2000s, and it was I believe it was during SEMA, the big car convention. And yeah, we get a phone call at the restaurant looking for a table for 4. And it actually is Mario Andretti on the other line. And he's like, hey, I'm looking to grab a table. And at the time we were fully booked. And Dr. Signorelli is on the phone chatting with who he doesn't know, but is Mario Andretti. And Mario says, I really think maybe you could fit me in. I'm Mario Andretti here for the big, SEMA convention. And Dr. Signorelli and his wit is like, well, that's great. I'm Wyatt Earp, and so certainly when you come in, ask for Wyatt Earp, and we'll get you seated. So they end the conversation right there, and an hour or so later, sure enough, Mario Andretti walks in the restaurant and asks for Wyatt Earp, and so the maitre d' at the time walks back to the office and says to Dr. Signorelli, there's a gentleman here looking for Wyatt Earp. And so Dr. Signorelli walks to the front, and sure enough, Mario Andretti is sitting there, and they have a great laugh, and we got him in. And to his credit, Mario likes to come back every year and join us when he's in town for SEMA. He's a tremendous supporter of the restaurant, which we really appreciate. And it's just been, it's one of those stories of many of how folks have found themselves in the Golden Steer and continue to come back.
And to your credit, you have put their names on tables, on spaces, on rooms, and it really does harken back to that day. And now in the age of COVID, when you can't sit at every single table, tell us what you've done, because I think this is just hysterical.
Yeah, so I mean, when we reopened in June, we knew we had to do something that was different. We couldn't have just an empty, one of the things that people would continually give us feedback on is that they loved the energy of the Steer. They loved when it was packed, and, it was a good volume inside, and people just love that. And so we knew that keeping every other table, and especially booths, we're famous for our booths, keeping every other booth empty would change that energy and the look of the restaurant. And so we decided to have a little fun with it. So we were doing some brainstorming before we opened and said, well, wouldn't it be fun if we put some mannequins into these empty booths? And we dressed the mannequins, and we found mannequins that looked like the celebrities that used to sit there. And so we reached out to, and Mark, you've mentioned a couple of times of folks not being from Las Vegas. I myself am not from Las Vegas. I'm from Chicago. And I was surprised, although I shouldn't have been, to learn that there is a business dedicated solely to mannequin rentals here in Las Vegas. It's Las Vegas Mannequins. And so we went over to their warehouse. They've been tremendously supportive and helpful, and a great partner in this. And we told them what we were looking for, and they said, yeah, we have some lookalikes. And so we grabbed a Marilyn Monroe and a Joe DiMaggio. So in the Maryland booth, we have the two of them sitting together. We have an Elvis Presley one that's in the Elvis booth. And then we have a John Wayne, and then of course Dean Martin and Joey Bishop. So we were able to have some fun with it, and folks have enjoyed seeing that. There's been certainly a couple of folks they raise their eyebrows and think for a second that that's filled, and they're like, well, why are you getting people next to each other? And then they realize that it's a mannequin. So it's been a great conversation piece and just a way to kind of keep some levity in these times.
And to put this, just to back up for a second, remember that this is at a time when other restaurants are circling the drain because they don't have these stories and they don't have the ability and they don't have the brand to reach out across the country. I think what you've done is truly amazing. The one thing that I said right from the beginning, and I mentioned this to Dr. Signorelli when we met, and that is that the genius was in not touching the core, not changing anything, nothing. You don't walk into a place that you value because it has this iconic vibe to it and then go, well, except we can change this, this, and this, and we'll somehow still keep the iconic. That was brilliant. And you have changed some things, but things like wine lists, wines that are no longer, you've updated wine list with a really, a real eye to a really, really wide variety. But it takes a lot of self-discipline to take hands off because it's human nature. I'm going to change this. I'm going to put that. I'm going to do this because everybody wants to leave their mark. You really did keep it all original, didn't you?
Well, we appreciate that. And we have. I mean, and you're right. There is definitely a level of self-discipline. And I will say that, having a staff that has been here that have been around for decades certainly helps because, sometimes you'll come up with some crazy ideas and they'll, that's not I always get reminded that Frank Sinatra would probably turn over in his grave if we decided to do that. But no, the magic of the steer is, like you said earlier, is that you step inside and you're walking back into old Vegas. And we make sure that things are looking good and looking their best. But we're not going to change it, and we're never going to change it. It's the magic of the steer. And the best part is that every day that passes is just another day of history and authenticity that is being created. And from the mob room where the mobsters used to eat to the original bar and lounge area that's now an extension of our dining room to the current bar and lounge that was added in the 70s. There's something special in every room. And we just endeavor to keep it that way. And it's been, the reception from guests, they love that. They love that, you walk back inside and it looks like you're stepping back into the 60s and 70s. And so it's a ton of fun.
It's a beautiful place, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and telling this great story and for keeping things up and positive and jobs going and money flowing through your place. And it's a beautiful thing to behold, and it's all ingenuity and that entrepreneurial spirit that we prize so much in Las Vegas. Thank you. Thank you both.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. We appreciate it.
And for all of you out there who own businesses, have that entrepreneurial spirit in your heart, or care about someone who does, remember to like and share the InBizLV podcast on Facebook. You can also catch us on YouTube, iTunes, or my personal favorite, Stitcher. And if you know of an interesting business with a story to tell, you can reach Fierro Communications at 702-385-7300. Make it a great day. See you out there in the deal stream. We're out of here.